how on earth have they got into this mess?
Yeah, well, and the mess is, there was an Economist headline this week, and then there were none. You had to chuckle at that, which is not quite the truth. There are still, as we just heard, some presidential candidates left, but the reality is 3 of the 5 frontrunners have essentially, at least pending this appeal that you talked about, have been knocked out for now. What's going on here? What you really have, if you want to boil it down, is some constitutional problems coming home to roost. Do you remember last March, after Hosni Mubarak was ousted, there was a constitutional referendum, one that was strongly supported, high turnout by most Egyptians. It tweaked the constitution. The problem was there was a big clash in society at the time, mostly the pro-democracy activists, the revolutionaries, the secular liberals saying way too early to be holding elections before you write a new constitution. They didn't like the military's close involvement in the tweaking of this constitution. Amendments which cut down on the length of time presidents could serve also put in a stipulation all presidential candidates must be over 40 and not married to a non-Egyptian, which, as we just saw, is very crucial right now. We're still having the fallout from that clash. There is a sense in society that they really should have written this new constitution and then held the elections rather than doing it backwards, holding the elections first. Right now, the assembly, which is supposed to write this new constitution, is essentially its work is on hold. And if and when this new constitution is written, it will only happen after a new president is installed. We are seeing a lot of fallout from that. We're seeing a lot of clashes, and we're seeing a lot of resentment, and a lot of people with the perception that the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, what we all call SCAF, its acronym, is very much manipulating, pulling the strings, and is in control here. And that's part of the reason, only part of the reason, there are follow-up questions here as to why we're seeing what's happening now.
When you look down the list, though, there is still quite a broad range of different candidates, isn't there? I mean, doesn't that still suggest that it's pretty democratic?
And this is the counter-argument, exactly. For all of the chaos, for all of the tumult in this process, and for the fact that we've had major candidates disqualified, look at who's been disqualified. We've had a Salafist, which is a very hard-line Islamist candidate, Abu Ismail. He's been disqualified on the basis that his mother is married to an American, i.e. the non-Egyptian we were just talking about in the Constitution. We've had a Muslim Brotherhood candidate disqualified, a little bit, more centrist than the hardline Islamists, on the grounds that he was a criminal. He served jail under Mubarak, albeit it was more of a political sentence than anything else. And this sense of you have candidates from across the political spectrum who are at least allowed to run and are allowed to appeal and may still end up running, that gives the sense that even if the military is in control, at least in this electoral process, you've had candidates representing all of the strains in society allowed to run, whether it's hardline Islamists, whether it's revolutionaries. You have Amr Moussa, the former head of the Arab League, who is right now, well, his reputation is changing a little bit. Some people say he's in the hands of the military, but he has been very much supported in the past by a lot of the more secular parts of society. So you do have representation, whether you like or not, whether you like the candidates who are running or not, they do represent a spectrum of Egyptian society.
Everyone also seems to have their backup plan.
Absolutely. And the backup candidates are not to everyone's liking. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood had anticipated the possibility that its candidate, Khairat al-Shatter, would be excluded or at least barred and his appeal pending. They have a backup candidate, a man named Mohammed Morsi, who is not really seen as very charismatic, not very beloved of the party. A lot of people thought there were many more leading lights within the Muslim Brotherhood that people should have put forward, that he wasn't necessarily the consensus candidate people had been expecting. You have as well Abdel Fattah is an interesting candidate because he's split from the Muslim Brotherhood. He has now become sort of a darling in many cases of a lot of the more secular elements in Egyptian society. You also have, remember Omar Suleiman, who had been put forward, a lot of people thought as the military candidate, the ex-Mubarak regime candidate, the former vice president, prime minister. He has a stand-in as well, Ahmed Shafiq, who is now seen as a stand-in for sort of the military's choice of candidate. Everyone is waiting in the wings to put someone in if and when this appeals process, this decision comes down, and perhaps those frontline candidates are, in fact, it's confirmed that they're disqualified.
Very, very briefly, what about the US? What are they saying? Because obviously they're crucial to this, aren't they?
Yeah, the US has been very, very wary of doing anything that might sort of alienate what has been its traditional ally, Egypt, very important ally in that region for a long time. They are watching closely, looking. Obviously, they have their concerns, but on an official diplomatic level, they are right now voicing their support officially for free and fair elections in Egypt. They do not want to put their hands too much into the cookie jar here, so to speak. We'll remember that there had been an incident late last year where a lot of U.S. NGOs, non-governmental organizations, promoting democracy groups, they had been raided by Egyptian authorities. That created a bit of a fallout and a spat between the Washington and Cairo. They're probably trying now to smooth things over there. They don't want to do anything that are going to create too many ripples. They're watching, waiting, hoping.
As we all are. Doug Herbert, our international affairs editor here on France 24. Now, Sudan's parliament has branded South Sudan an enemy and demanded its army swiftly recapture a disputed oil-producing region. It's a further escalation of border tensions, which has brought the former civil war foes closer to another full-blown conflict. South Sudan, which seceded from Sudan in July, seized the disputed Heglig oil field last Tuesday, prompting its northern neighbour to vow to recapture the area by all means. The first aid convoy able to get through northern Mali has arrived in Gao and Timbuktu with medicine for a population on the verge of suffering a major humanitarian crisis. The convoy, organised by northerners, in fact, living in Bamako, brought 3 tons of medicine, food and other first aid materials. Doctors say the arrival of emergency supplies at the hospital in Gao immediately saved the lives of 3 people who were operated on. The fighting, sweeping through northern Mali, has left behind abandoned and destitute villages and hundreds of thousands of refugees. And meanwhile, it's hoped talks between the warring factions could bear fruit.
Mali's central government sent out a message to all the rebel groups now controlling the north of the country.
We want to solve the serious problems we are facing in northern Mali through dialogue and negotiation.
The Islamist group Ansar Dine, which controls several towns, now says it's opened a dialogue with the government in the capital, Bamako. It has authorised trucks carrying humanitarian aid to reach the north, but only on the condition that the aid is from Mali and not from France or the United States. Despite the arrival of some convoys, the situation remains critical.
What we have is not sufficient, but we hope it will nevertheless reach very quickly all the people who are in desperate need of help.
Witnesses say Ansar Dine's influence in the north is growing. It has been accused of having links with Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. The Malian government warned it was ready to hold talks with various factions, including Ansar Dine, but not with armed foreign jihadist groups, a clear reference to Al-Qaeda.
Now, the Australian Prime Minister has announced that she plans to pull most of the country's troops out of Afghanistan nearly a year earlier than planned. Julia Gillard cited security improvements, saying they have nearly completed their mission to transfer security responsibilities to Afghan forces in the decade-long war. Most troops should be home by the end of 2013. The US, of course, has also been accelerating its plans to withdraw the last US troops due to leave by the end of 2014. Well, earlier I spoke to our correspondent in Sydney, Roger Maynard, and I asked him exactly what has been announced.
This decision will essentially mean the majority of Australia's 1,550 troops will be out of Afghanistan by the end of next year, and some a good deal before then. In a speech here today, Prime Minister Gillard explained that security in Afghanistan had improved, and she would expect the withdrawal process to take between 12 to 18 months. Now, originally, it looked like Australia would follow the withdrawal date set down by NATO-led international forces to bring back troops by the end of 2014, but that's now been brought forward by at least a year, it looks.
Roger, let's be a bit cynical. Her opponents will be, of course. Why has she announced this now?
Well, a total of 33 Australian soldiers have been killed while serving in Afghanistan, and the recent upsurge in Taliban activity may also have helped to force the government's hand. But it should also be noted that the new withdrawal is likely to coincide with the next federal election here in Australia, which is due in about 12 to 18 months' time. And clearly the Labor government is hoping this move will give it a bit of an electoral boost.
Roger Maynard, our correspondent in Sydney. Now, if you're anything like me, maybe dancing, not your thing, maybe. So spare a thought for this guy. A Colorado man has danced off against more than 200 women in a bid to become the Denver Broncos' first male cheerleader. Now, Sasha Heppel said, "This is huge. I'm excited. No male has made it through the auditions, ever. I don't even know if a male made it to the auditions, in fact." Unfortunately for them, he looks like Mick Jagger to me anyway. Fortunately for him, the judges decided he may need a little bit more work in his routine, and he would not be among the elite squad. At least he tried. Sasha Happel. Fantastic. A name for the future, you never know. So the headlines once again then here on France 24. Shells falling, people being arrested.